Hello and welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg, and on today's show... Welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg, and on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at backup and restore processes for Alpine Linux on Raspberry Pi. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's see. So, let me pull up the right thing here really quick. So, we have the same installation that we have the last time around. And what this is we're going to be going through a few things, in particular, going through how to back up both individual files within the file system as well as the overall configuration that we save through LBU. And in order to do that, we're going to be using SSH to terminal into the machine, but we're also going to be using the actual physical console for some of the things. So if you actually wanted to change machines as you were going through everything, let's say your SD card died, you had a backup, and you could actually redeploy it on a different SD card. So this also works for doing OS upgrades, things of that nature, but let's go through it step by step. It's just a couple of different methods that we could actually employ to be able to create good backups. And just before we begin, backups are very important because, especially on Raspberry Pi, the medium is very volatile. You know, SD cards don't last forever. They don't have infinite write cycles. So it's very important to be able to make sure that any critical data is backed up. And if you put a lot of effort into actually building a configuration, you want to make sure that you save that config. So first, let's start with tar. Okay, and tar is kind of like a zip file for Linux. So let's say we wanted to back up pretty much the entire operating system, okay, and just build the tar file. Now, in this particular case, I think it's kind of excessive because a lot of the files, things like that, especially on the boot drive, are just going to be from the ISO. So there's really not a reason to back those up. But let's say you built custom programs, things like that. You have everything kind of nestled where you want it to be. You can actually go through and create this backup. And it's not as comprehensive as LBU, but it is a good way to be able to have it so you can search through it on other operating systems or otherwise. So the command for that is tar space, and then there's a lot of flags that we're going to set. So it's CVPZF, and I'm not going through what those are. It doesn't matter. It's just there's a lot of them. It's just going to copy it into the tar file, and the tar file name is going to be backup.tar.gz. And GZ is a compression format that is on top of tar, which is why it seems like it has two extensions, because technically it does. So the GZ will make it significantly smaller than it would be otherwise, especially when it's text. If it's media, things like that, it may not actually compress it all that much at all. But if it's a lot of repetitive text, things of that nature, it will actually do a really good job at it. So we're going to back up the entire root, but we want to exclude a few things before we do that. So we're going to do exclude equals / backup.tar, so it doesn't become, and we're going to do / home / what is our present working directory? Actually, we're going to save it to the root. So we'll do backup.tar.gz. Okay, and that's pretty much this file, so it doesn't become a recursive loop and start saving itself to itself. So next, we're going to exclude proc. And the reason being is that proc just has process information that is runtime dependent or specific. So if you do have anything that's under that folder, it's going to regenerate the next time a particular service or otherwise runs. So it's not something that you would ever have to save. And that would be exclude equals. And next one is -- exclude equals / mount, which is where we have some of our specifically our USB drive. We don't want to back that up because really that's just going to be another hard drive already. So unless we explicitly wanted to back up that hard drive, which at that point I would say just back up that drive, we don't want it to be a part of our root OS backup. And then the next one is, and it's going to wrap around here, /media, which is where we have our boot drive. Again, it's going to be duplicated anyway, just by virtue of what it is. So we don't want to back up that one as well. And then next one is /dev. Now, I would say this gets a little bit of a gray area, but generally speaking, you're not modifying files directly inside of /dev. So I would say, unless there's a special circumstance, this is a good thing to add as well, because it's going to generally be redundant with package installations that would otherwise not need this type of backup, because this is not going to back up the packages themselves. And then exclude /sys, which is your system folder. Again, there's nothing in there that you're going to modify, so it doesn't really have anything that you need to worry about. And finally, it's /run. And again, this is a runtime folder that doesn't have any unique data in there that would otherwise cause a problem. And then /, which is where we want to back up. All right, and I'm just going to correct this just so it's consistent with what we have on the exclude, which is we're defining an explicit path opposed to a relative path. Right now, I'm in the present working. My present working directory is the home directory for test Alpine. So if I would just saved it without the /, it would show up in the home directory. But because we excluded it at an absolute directory with the /, and of course we could have just put exclude otherwise, put the path to the home directory, etc. But it's definitely something we want to make sure that is the same between those two portions of the command. So let's go ahead and run it. We see what's currently being copied into it. So it's a lot of the mod loop, everything else like that, kernel drivers, things like that. Again, I'm not sure that this in particular, we probably could have excluded more files and more directories for things that are going to overlap other things. But we see it chugging away. Yeah, and it's doing modules and firmware. Probably could have gone through. Now here it's doing media folder, which we told it to exclude. So maybe it is actually not, it's not doing what we want it to. Yeah, it's definitely not doing what we want it to. So generally speaking, you shouldn't have to do this, but I'm doing /* at the end of these, which on other Linux you don't have to do. But I'm going to do it here, and that should actually cause it to actually forcibly say anything in this directory opposed to the directory itself. But I'm not sure why it went into it. Still doing it. So I didn't run this on this particular machine, which I admit is probably not the way to go. But as it were, it is something where you can run it just straight up and copy to another drive that's not a part of the structure. And one of the ways to do that is through SSH, which we'll go into in a little bit. I'm not going to demonstrate it, but it is something where I'll show you the syntax for the actual command. But if we look at the root directory, we do see backup.tar.gz does exist. So I'm just going to, because it's going to take forever for us to compress the entire drive down to nothing, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do backup.tar, but then I'm just going to define that it should be the home folder. And that's what we want to back up. Let me see. Home folder does exist. See, I said I wasn't going to get into it. So C is create, V is verbose, which is fine. That shows the names as it's going. P is for oh, it may not translate. And that's probably what it is. So Z is obviously the tar.gz. So it's this right here, which is compressed using gzip. There are other options for compression algorithms to be able to use as well. And then F is for file. So it's the name of the tar file. So the only thing it doesn't seem to like is the P. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Actually, that could be the reason why it's doing it. Let's cd into the root. All right, so it did copy that there. If we ls, we see backup.tar.gz is present. So let's cd back into, and that also may be why the excludes didn't work. Just for fun, let's actually run that. So we'll run the long command the original way that I had it. Now that we're in the root. Nope, still doing it. Let me get rid of this excludes as well. Interestingly, I'm just going to remove the slashes, which is not typical for most operating systems, Linux operating systems. It really wants to back up that hidden folder as well. And actually, I didn't put an explicit exclude for that. Oh, there we go. That's the behavior we wanted. And so if you see what actually happened is that I didn't actually explicitly define that I wanted to exclude the hidden folder called modloop. In this particular case, I did have to remove the slashes, or at least I did remove the slashes when I was in the root directory just because we saw the other errors previously, and that made it work as expected. But you're supposed to be able to run this pretty much from any directory and be able to do it to any directory by using absolute paths. So it could be a glitch inside of this particular distribution, but realistically, it's going to work across using the same command across all operating systems. And it didn't mind that the P was in there as a flag, but I would have to look a little bit deeper to see what that actually was entailing. So now that we have created that, we can untar that as well. So let's take a look at what's inside. So we'll do tar, and we're actually going to cd back to our home directory just so we have it. It's empty right now. So we'll do tar -x for extract, z because it's zipped, or it's gzipped encoded with the .gz extension. V for verbose, F for file name, and we'll do /backup. And we'll do the destination directory if we wanted to, which would be -C and then the place that we wanted to put it. But in this case, we actually just want to do it to this here so we don't have to put any additional arguments. So we hit that. When we hit ls, we see that now within our home folder, we have bin, etc home, all of those folders that we just backed up. So if we cd into home, we see there's no files there. Let's cd into bin. And we see all of the contents of the regular bin now preserved in this particular file. And it's very important to test your backup files before you call it a valid backup. Otherwise, you're going to run into situations where it's not necessarily, the time that you need it, you find out that it's not working or something went wrong. So it's definitely important to make sure that you're actually, resize this a little bit, but it's definitely make sure that you have a proper backup before you think you have a proper backup. So prove it. Make sure it's valid. All right, so we just saved a file using the tar method, and then we restored it back by extracting the tar. So we can also back up specific directories by doing the same kind of thing. So let's say we want to now back up our home directory. Right, so we're in our home directory. Let's back out to /, and then let's create a new backup called home. So we'll do tar -czvf, and we'll do, let's call it home backup.tar.gz once again. And the path that we want to back up is /home/. And it doesn't like the slashes for some reason. I'm not sure, but it did back it up. But I'm not sure that it actually saved anything to it. So another option that we can do if we do tar --help is we can actually look inside. So we can take a look at what the list is with the T command, the T flag. So it will just show us what's inside without it actually being without it actually extracting it. So just like we did before, where we did xvf, but in this case, I did underscore. So home backup, but instead of actually extracting it, we want to list it. Otherwise, everything else stays the same. Although it's not being very cooperative as well. I apologize. I generated my list of notes on a different machine. So I'm going to skip past all this. I mean, point being is that you have the ability to be able to look in and actually determine what the specific files are before you actually extract them, and you can extract specific files as well. And let's just see. But I don't actually think that it saved anything on that particular run, because it doesn't appear to be working on this. So anyway, I don't think that tar is what you want to do unless you're backing up extremely specific files, and then you'd have that in a subfolder and you just back up that particular folder. So, and there's other ways to do it, but rsync is actually a preferred option if you're going to back it up to an external drive. And part of the reason for that is that think of tar as being like a full backup. And really, so just so you know, tar is actually based on tape archive. That's actually what it stands for. And it just happens to create a file that emulates the functionality of a tape archive, but it can actually integrate and control LTO libraries, things like that, pretty well. So that's kind of what the basis of what that is. So it's very old, but it's also kind of like taking a full backup every time that you want to take a backup, which is not necessarily space efficient if you don't have a lot of files changing during that time. So another option is using rsync. So rsync is pretty much the ability to be able to make two directories exactly the same. So if we wanted to, well, first, before we do anything with rsync, we have to install it. So we'll do apk add rsync. It will install it. It's already installed in this particular case, and I believe that's because we used it previously in order to, I think, either last video or the video before that, to actually demonstrate how to use the USB drive. But point being is that we can use this to be able to specify a source directory and match a destination directory to that, but it will do it in a way that is incremental. So files that are the same, it will not retransfer. And so if you have a separate hard drive that you're using for backup purposes, you can create an asynchronous type of backup that's not necessarily compressed. It depends on what your storage is, but you will transfer and save those files as you go. So that's actually a lot better because it's more space efficient, but also you can run it more often because it doesn't take up as much resources as a full backup does, since it's going to read your entire drive every time that it goes through. With rsync, it will actually check hash codes for, pretty much checksum data for the actual files or other things like dates, things of that nature, dates and file size, which is not reading the entire file in order to determine if it has a current backup for it. So going from here, let's do clear, we'll do rsync, and then A, capital A, X, and V. And then we'll do our source directory. In this case, let's say we wanted to back up our home directory. Okay, and then our destination directory, which in this case, let's put it on our USB drive. Okay, so it's going to be media, right, our option USB. Oh, we did mount. So we'll do mount, USB drive, and then we have new user that's there. But we can create a new folder. So let's do that first. So we'll do make dir, we'll do /mount, /USB drive, and we'll do /backup. And let's save it there. So we'll do rsync. Perfect. And now we can run it, and we'll see exactly what it's going to do. We can also exclude directories, things like that, but in this particular case, we already know what we have in there. So generally, you'd want to do a more focused approach. So user data, things of that nature, things that you don't already have existing backups of, you would use rsync in order to be able to keep it up to date, since you know they're going to be changing regularly. All right, and right now it says sending incremental file list. It has one file. And let's cd into home. Oh, root. So we extracted our files earlier to root, which is not the home directory because that would be for the users. This particular login is root. That's it's late at night. Been a long day. So let's see. We'll run it again. And now we see that it's actually running files. It transferred 21 megabytes, and it was doing it at says 42 megabytes a second. So it says the total size, and then it says the speedup was 1.0, which meaning there was no speedup. So all of the files were unique and did not previously exist on the destination directory. If we run it a second time, we see the speedup is 635 and 2/3. So realistically, all of those files were already there, so it didn't have to transfer anything, so it was able to move a lot faster as a result. So if we make a change, for example, if we made a change by adding a file, so we'll touch new file.txt, and we run the command again, we see that we have a command history change as well as new file.txt. And those are the only two things that moved, but we still had a 604 time, multiplier as far as the speed up versus if we had to transfer the entire thing again. So if we actually look and ls into the directory that we saved it, so it was mount USB drive backup, we see new file exists there as well. And if we actually do a -l, we see that we have LA, excuse me, because I want to see that. We have also the ash history. So it actually saves a lot of the user session data associated with this. So also save hidden files like the .ssh folder if you had keys in there, things of that nature. So it's also important to keep track of, what your permissions are, things of that nature, and you can actually preserve those across as you're actually copying them with rsync. So just a very good tool to keep in mind. But one of the nice things about this is because it's lightweight, we can actually add it as a cron job. So when we add it as a cron job, we can make it so it runs every minute or so. So if we go into cron tab, all right, and because this is the Raspberry Pi installation, it does have that already included as a default package. We'll do -e. And we see these are what we currently have running, which are system defaults. So what we would actually do is we would put the command that we just put in here and then save it out. And what I'm going to do to make this easy is I'm just going to pull it up in memory. Because this is SSH, I can just highlight it. And it's copied to clipboard because this is putty. Right, go back into cron tab, go down to the bottom. Right, and now it shows us what the actual syntax is up here for what the positional notation means for each position. And just to kind of show you what cron tab is, this asterisk up here means any minute. So if you do any, it means any. It matches everything. So if the number is between 0 and 59, it will run on each of those. So dividing it by 15 means it will run every 15 minutes, right? And that will be of every hour of every day of every month of every weekday. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. There's also other flags like @reboot or @shutdown that can also provide some additional functionality if you only want it to run once when the system is brought up or down. But in this particular case, let's have it run every 10 minutes. So we're going to do */10, tab key, *****, and then we're going to paste the command. Right? So just as it normally would be. And now what will happen is every time that the 10-minute, it is actually 10 minutes, it will come through and it will save all of those files that we have in our root folder to our backup location. So we WQ that out, and now the cron tab is saved. If we did want to monitor the progress of the cron tab, for example, we could also go into the log files if we had it running and be able to view it there, or in messages in this particular case. So just an example of that, /var log messages, and we can see pretty much cron D is running here the whole time. And we see the 15-minute ran twice since we've been doing this stream. So it's something where you can actually see what's going on. You can't see if it runs, but you can see if it errors. Not within the script, but if it can't run it, it will tell you. But it will tell you at least that that particular entry ran. So, very useful. And we'll Control-C out of that and clear it. And I'm just going to leave that there. We'll let it keep backing up to the USB drive, just like we have the home directory there for the other user. So let's see. So the other thing that I wanted to cover, just skipping through a few things here, because otherwise I think the video is going to be a bit too long, is I wanted to cover how to move and change LBU installation or LBU configurations between SD drives. And part of the reason that you would do that is if your SD card actually fails, you want to be able to move that configuration over to get it back up and running, but you also want to be able to back it up. So in the event that the drive becomes inaccessible entirely, you don't have to start from scratch and reconfigure everything again. You can just copy it on and be off and running. You can also port it to different systems, things like that, duplicate it, whatever you want to do with it, But this is the procedure that will work for all of that. So what I have here is FileZilla. And I already have a second SD card that is pre-installed with Alpine Linux. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in to this particular machine. So going to put in the credentials, and obviously it has to be SSHable credentials. You can use a key file if you set up a connection, but in this particular case, for demonstration and non-production purposes, I did keep it with a password. So just keep that in mind. And I think that was the right IP address. No, it wasn't. So here we are in the root of the directory. So even though it's a read-only file system, we do have access to the boot drive, but we have to access it through its mount. Right? So this is not actually the root of the whole system. It's just what we copied into the root directory, which was what we did before. So we go into our actual root directory. We go to mount. I'm sorry, not mount. We go to media, MMC, BLK, USB, BLK0P1, which is multimedia card block device 0, partition 1, which if you're using the SD card, it's going to always show up that way. We scroll down to the bottom, we actually see the apk ovl.tar.gz. And I want you to take a look at something here. So last time we saved it was 10/9/2023, which was last week in this particular case, where this is 1 week later. So if we actually go back over here and we type lbu commit-d, right, to incorporate the changes that we just made to cron, we can come back over here to FileZilla, hit F5, and it believes it's 7/6/2023, just because it looks like there's an issue with the date. But it is setting it to the date it thinks it is. And just for fun, I'm going to try restarting Cron and see if we can get the actual date to show up, because that gets annoying if the date is incorrect. Well, it still thinks the date is incorrect. So sometimes that happens because it can't reach the actual NTP server. In this particular case, I do have kind of a weird setup as far as the NTP, just to try and keep things, well, it works for other devices, but it doesn't always work for this without doing a bunch of special configuration, which we haven't done. So, we do our best, but it doesn't matter. It's still going to be a valid backup, but it is the backup that we just took. So the way that we actually copy it over, so this is a default config. The only thing I've added special is the user config statement over here, which is actually going to change the resolution so we can see it. But outside of that, it's a vanilla installation, just like we did with the previous installation video. So I'm going to drag and drop the test Alpine over to here. And it's asking for the password once more. Which master password is this asking for? Oh, wait. That's actually a setting I have with FileZilla. I'm not using a dedicated machine that I would usually use for this just because it makes the actual streaming easier. But so generally speaking, if you have a vanilla installation of FileZilla, that won't show up either. But that wasn't related to the server. That was related to saved passwords that I have stored on FileZilla as part of encrypting them. So anyway, back to this. So we've copied over the apkovl.tar.gz file and moved it over onto the new SD card that has our vanilla installation on there. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to shut down our existing Raspberry Pi. Okay, and in this particular case, I'm just going to type halt because we do have some things mounted that I want to make sure are not corrupted by accidentally shutting it down improperly. If we didn't have a bunch of extra drives mounted, things of that nature, or if they were all read-only, you know, it'd probably be fine. Or if, generally speaking, if it's not writing to it, it's not going to corrupt it. But because we can, I'm going to halt it and make sure it's actually going to shut down properly. And if we actually look at it, boom, 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 it completely turned off. So that's perfect. All right, and I'm going to eject this drive. Excellent. And now let me switch it out. All right, and I just plugged power back into it. And we are looking at the actual output of the screen, so I have to switch to a different keyboard, which is going to make this much easier. So pretty much it's going to boot up, and it should go straight in, assuming I set up the card right and didn't mess it up entirely. Which I say, but I got this out of a random... another random Raspberry Pi. And specifically, the error that I'm getting is the flashing status light. And usually that means that there's an issue with reading the drive. And in this particular case, I don't believe I have any issues with it. Let me just double check it. So I'm going into Disk Manager. And this will one second. So I'm going to go into Storage, Disk Management. Just take a look. You see all the hard drives. Ooh, ah. Right, so we see it does have the boot partition here, which is 256 megabyte fat. And really should be a FAT32. So let me see what I can do here really quick. So I'm actually just going to quickly do the procedure that we did in the other video. So if you did want to install something from the get-go, you could do it this way as well. Let's see. Just a moment. All right, so we're going to do disk part. Before I do that, I am just going to dip in to the actual drive, pull off that one file that I created. So if we actually look, I'm pulling these two files, which are the file that we copied as well as this user CFG. I'm going to place them somewhere else really quick. Just so that way we don't have to go through it again since we already shut it down. And I will drop them in the project folder. Boom, boom, boom. Perfect. Okay. So now we'll list disk. We will select disk 4. And we will clean it. It looks like it did succeed, but it's not happy. And that may be the reason why we can't boot off of it. But actually, it looks like it worked. So let's ignore everything that it said as far as errors, and we'll actually go ahead and do simple volume. Next, next, next. FAT32, new volume, perform quick format. Yes, excellent. Okay, it's formatting now. And here we have a new volume. So first thing I'm going to do is just dump our files right back in there. So these are the two files that we just copied back. We're going to go over to where I have the actual image. Boom, 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 boom. In this case, I'm using WinRAR just because it's easier. I believe in the new update to Windows, they're actually going to have native support for this, which is very exciting. But this is our vanilla installation that was literally just downloaded off the website today, which may or may not have been a good thing. Hopefully it doesn't have bugs. We go over here, new volume, extract. It's moving at the speed of writing to an SD card. Excellent. Of course, this is the tough thing when you actually get into some of the more advanced functions of Linux is that unless you really test them, and in this particular case, I probably could have spent longer validating some of this stuff. It's something where it can definitely take some time and a few different attempts in order to get things to work appropriately. But once you get it working, it tends to be extremely stable. So now that we have this, let's eject it. Close that out. And let's try it again. Let me switch over to the correct view. There we go. Success. Probably should have started with that beforehand, but that's how that goes. So it's still booting. I'm having to use its different keyboard in order to get to this point because there's an issue that's going to develop. And let's see. So pretty much it didn't install any of our packages associated with this. So we can try and log in locally. Well. All right. So network initialized appropriately, but we're never going to be able to see it with that. So I do believe that's related to one of our other packages that was actually going through. We can just log in through SSH. And I just want to see what's currently running. What was it? There we go. Just RC update. So I do believe update MOTD time is not helping us, as well as a few other things. But pretty much what happens is because we transferred over from the vanilla operating system installation, we're in a situation where we don't have any of the packages that we needed, which is why it started up so quickly. So in order to remediate that, we're actually going to go through this quick procedure. Okay, so everything is vanilla. There's nothing installed right now. So we need to add the packages. We do that with APK. And we're just going to put APK add with no arguments after it. What it's going to do is it's going to update the repositories, and then it's going to install all of the missing packages that it's supposed to have. Once we do that, then we actually want to go through, we want to do APK cache sync, which will pretty much bring the cache to the appropriate versions for what the OS is expecting, or what the configuration that we just loaded is expecting. And then we want to do APK cache clean to get rid of packages that we no longer need. Then once we do that, we want to do LBU commit-d again, which will update our LBU to make sure that we're actually in a situation where it's acting as it's supposed to. And then we can reboot it. And I'm going to try going back to this. So I'm going to hit reboot. We'll go back to the physical. We do see that once we installed all the packages that it did actually bring us to a proper console login on the base desktop. And that's kind of what we want, because it was originally caused by not having the required packages installed in order to be able to function properly, so it started sending errors. So now that we have everything installed, it should actually load appropriately. Which we say that. Just want to see if it actually installed those packages. No, it didn't. So what happened was it didn't actually update the cache. And sometimes this happens, and you have to rerun setup APK cache again in order for it to recognize it. It just depends on how it saves it. If it saves it using the relative path, it will be fine, but in some cases it actually does it using the drive ID, which obviously will not follow if you change out the drive. So we'll set this up. We're going to save it to the default location because that's where we want it anyway. Right? And let's do the same thing. So we'll do, I'm also going to set up LBU once again, just because sometimes that does the same exact thing. Where do we want to store it? Memory card, enter, perfect. So now we'll do LBU commit-D, APK cache sync. Boom, 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 boom. We'll do APK update. APK cache sync. There we go. So now we see that it actually downloaded the needed packages that we need in order to restart successfully. So that was resolved with setup-apk cache. So now that we have all those downloaded, let's do apk cache clean once again. And lbu commit-d. Even though nothing really changed, we just want to make sure that everything is reflected and in sync with each other. Now let's reboot again. Right, we see processes are stopping. Loaded very quickly. I'm concerned. Bum, bum, bum. No, still don't think it's taking it. Oh, it says it's there. Oh, no, it did work as expected. I'm not sure what that other error is. That may be related to something else that we had previously installed that I didn't notice. So whatever that was, I'll have to find that out at a later time. But point being, we can log in here. We can do everything that we need to do as well. So APK update through the front console, just like we would anything else. So if there's an issue with actually getting into, be able to, let's see. Gave updates about downloading the packages, but that may be related to network. But point being is that if we actually wanted to be able to do something here, transition it, we just change from one SD card to another successfully without it actually, having an issue. And the actual file size for the actual config file overall complete was about 15 kilobytes. So it's not particularly big, and you can save these. They're very easy to increment off of the machines that you're working on and be able to redeploy them very quickly without a lot of effort. Now, granted, the whole package thing where it can't rectify that is still a little bit annoying, and technically you can write a script that you engage as a startup script to be able to resolve that as well. And maybe we'll do that in the future as far as making automatically recoverable and updatable, images, or as far as configurations for images. But this can also be used for things like if you have differences in, if you want to upgrade the OS, you could do that as well. But there's also, you got to keep in mind, if you're changing the operating system versions, it may change the repository for the packages that are involved. So you may actually need to update your APK repositories list in order to be able to get that to accommodate. But overall, I think a little a little rougher than I would like today, but I think we definitely got through the bulk of what we were trying to cover. So as far as you know, make sure you always have backups. It's going to save you in the end, and test those backups just to make sure that everything is working before you need them. But if you like the video, be sure to hit that that like button and leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend if you liked this video and think they might be interested. I would definitely appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And then hit that notification bell. That way you know the next time we're getting extended. So until then, take care.